Okay, so week 7, this is the second to last week of our course, and this is the last week that we will be doing a PowerPoint presentation and voiceover presentation. Week 8 just has one assignment, but it's a lengthier assignment, and then turning in your observation hours. So this is the last presentation, and we're going to cover staff training and school-wide behavior plans. All right, so first, effective staff training. It's extremely important that anyone working with a student receives training on the behavior plan. That plan must be implemented consistently across all staff and settings to be successful. And as we saw in our example behavior plan last week, the plan in the IEP could be very extensive or detailed. So it helps to create a simplified version in list form for staff, and then this can be posted in the classroom or on a clipboard. But you don't want any identifying information related to the student on that, so that someone just walking into the classroom would see the components of that child's behavior plan. So that's very important as well. But a lot of times, we'll go into a classroom and a student will have a behavior plan as part of their IEP, but the people working with their student, and that means anyone, speech therapist, OT, PT, paraeducator, different classroom teachers. There might be a learning support teacher versus, itinerant autistic support teacher versus gen ed teacher. None of them or not all of them have been trained or know what to do when the student engages in problem behavior or how to prevent it. So it's very, very, very important that training for all of those people occurs, and that they're implementing it consistently across all of those people, and also that they have this kind of like simplified version. So again, they don't need a copy of the entire IEP or the plan. They just need, for example, antecedent strategies, and then bulleted the things that they can do to prevent the problem behavior from happening, and then the consequence strategies, so that when problem behavior does happen, they know specifically and exactly what to do. But again, with no identifying information about the student. Okay, so ASR number 1, our question: how important is it that anyone working with a student receives training on the behavior plan? A, not important, B, somewhat important, or C, extremely important? And the answer is C, extremely important, that anyone, any staff member working with that student knows what to do and knows the behavior plan and has received training. Okay, so how do we conduct effective staff training? And a lot of times you, in your role as teacher, would be the one who is training other staff members. So how do we do this? Well, there are 4 steps to effective staff training, and this comes from research-based methods of training anyone in any type of job or employment setting. So number 1 first is explain the rationale. So you basically sit down as a team or individually with a staff member and review the plan. And you want to include why. How did we come to this plan? And again, not in very, they call it, the use of jargon, those terms, very simple, direct terms, but explain why we're doing this. And then the second step is you want to actually model the procedures. So you want to demonstrate all the procedures in the plan. So you would then, in working with the student, be modeling those antecedent strategies. If the student started to engage in problem behavior, you would be modeling the consequence strategies. If you might even sometimes have to use a mock student or a pretend student to model these procedures, but that's important. So first explaining the plan, modeling the procedures, and then the third step is coaching the staff member as she or he performs the procedure. So you would be observing the staff while they're engaging in the antecedent prevention strategies or the consequence strategies, and then you would be discreetly directing them while they perform the procedures. You'd be like, yep, okay, now remember to do this, and yeah, that was great, and you're kind of just quietly, but from the side, coaching them through. And then the fourth step is to complete fidelity checks. So then you would be observing the staff member, and you wouldn't be coaching, you would just be watching, and then you would have kind of like a checklist of the steps that they should be following for each of those components in the plan. And we'll cover more about the fidelity checks here as we go, but that's a really good way to provide feedback. So again, 4 steps for effective training for staff, or like I said, in any employment area, it's research-based, is explain the rationale, model the procedures, coach through the procedures, and then complete the fidelity checks. Okay, so ASR number 2, question. Effective staff training involves the following steps in the correct order. A, explain the rationale, model procedures, coach, complete fidelity checks. B, model procedures, explain the rationale, complete fidelity checks, coach. C, coach, model procedures, complete fidelity checks, explain the rationale. Or D, explain the rationale, coach, model procedures, complete fidelity checks. And the answer is A. First, explain the rationale. Second, model the procedures. Third, coach. And fourth, complete the fidelity checks. Okay, so more on fidelity checks because this is often new for teachers. So these are just a checklist of the procedures, and you would complete while observing the individual staff members or immediately after the observation. A staff member could actually complete one on themselves too, following an episode of problem behavior. How did they respond? Did they follow the correct consequence procedures? They could fill one of these out on themselves too if someone wasn't available to observe them. And these checks ensure that all staff are implementing the procedures as recommended and consistently. And they provide an objective way to provide feedback to staff. And this is important. We can all provide subjective ways of feedback. So just, yeah, that was great. I like how you did this. But to have this objective way is much more meaningful. And then too, if the staff member is struggling and needs some more work, it's right there on the paper. It's not you saying that they did everything wrong. It's kind of just, it's just written there, and it's much more explicit, and it's just an objective way to provide the feedback. Okay, so how do we create these fidelity checks? Well, we take the steps or procedures that are in the plan and convert them to question form. So whatever your list of antecedent strategies are or your consequence strategies, you would just convert those into a question form and then have a space to mark Y or no, or Y or N, which would be for yes or no. Or some people will do a check mark if it was correct or not. And then you would calculate the percent fidelity, and then you would use this to provide immediate feedback. Immediate feedback is best. That's when everything's fresh in everyone's mind. It's just research has shown that immediate feedback works much better than waiting to talk to someone about the procedures that they just used. Okay, ASR number 3, our question. When providing feedback to others, which type of feedback is best? A, best to wait until the end of the school day. B, best to wait until Friday. C, providing no feedback. Or D, immediate feedback is best. And the correct answer is D, immediate feedback is best. Okay, so here's an example consequence fidelity check. So in the left column are the consequence strategies that are written in the plan. So what to do when problem behavior occurs. You're going to block access to reinforcement, remain calm with neutral voice and expression, continue to repeat the direction or point to what the student needs to do, and then once the student complies with the directive, you're going to reinforce a small amount. So how those are converted to question form to list in your fidelity check is in the right column. So the consequence strategy is formatted as a fidelity check. Did you block access to reinforcement? Did you remain calm with neutral voice expression? Did you continue to repeat the direction and or point to what the student needs to do? And once the student complied with the directive, did you reinforce a small amount? Okay, so here is an example fidelity checklist, and this was for use of a promise reinforcer. And remember, we talked about a promise reinforcer sometimes being used as an effective antecedent strategy. So for this student, it was very important that to prevent problem behavior, a promise reinforcer was used. So they created this fidelity checklist to make sure that staff were using the promise reinforcer to prevent behavior consistently. In one of the assignments in this week, you're going to be creating a fidelity checklist, so you can use this one as an example. So you just have at the top, the date, the instructor, the student. There might be 2 people observing. Oftentimes, you really can't even get one person to observe. The staff member may just be filling it out on their own. IOA percent means the inter-observer agreement percent. So if there are 2 people observing, did they both agree that the staff member completed the steps as indicated? So you can see that the steps are just written in question form. Did instructor determine or reinforce what the student wanted at the moment? Yes, no, or not applicable. Did the instructor hold the item so it was visible to the student just before the instructor presented the instruction? Yes, no, not applicable. And it just goes right down through the steps. And then at the bottom, there's a section where you can write notes. And then you can also write how many out of 7, because there are 7 items listed, that were yeses. And then you would determine their percent of yeses or the percent of fidelity for that situation and for that instructor or staff member. Okay, our last section is school-wide positive behavior support plans for students with disabilities. And we're going to be looking at a patent publication for this section. Okay, so I'm not sure if you remember way back, I think it was week 1 in the introduction of this course, we talked about that, school-wide positive behavior support plans are very important, critical to the success of everyone in the school. The focus of this course, though, was a lot on those individual cases where we have students who it's not enough to have the school-wide positive behavior support plan. They need a very individualized, specific plan. You will come into contact with a lot of these students through the course of your career who need these very individualized plans. So that was the whole focus, most of the focus of this course. In my experience in consulting in a variety of classrooms in Pennsylvania, that is the area the teachers struggle with more, is those cases where, all right, a school-wide positive behavior support plan is not really working for this kiddo. We need to do something else. Once you're working, your school will have this school-wide positive behavior support plan in place. So for one of the assignments this week, you will be reading some patent publications on school-wide positive behavior support. This is a proactive approach versus a reactive approach. So the focus is on prevention of problem behavior through positive reinforcement. PATN stands for the Pennsylvania Training and Technical Assistance Network. It provides training and technical assistance to school entities across the state of PA. So it's kind of like the training branch of the PA State Bureau of Special Education. So ASR number 4, question. What organization provides training and technical assistance to school entities across the state of PA? A, PATN, or PATAN. I often get questioned about how you pronounce it. It really doesn't matter. The BACB, ASHA, or the State Licensing Board? And the answer is PATN or PATAN. Okay, ASR number 5, our question. PA's school-wide positive behavior support systems focuses on A, using punishment and punitive measures, B, using negative reinforcement, C, using proactive measures and positive reinforcement, or D, using reactive measures. And the answer is C, using proactive measures and positive reinforcement. So that brings us to the end of the presentation for this week. You'll be reading some more about the school-wide positive behavior support plans in your assignments.